Breaking news from the Middle East, UPS Flight 6 departs Dubai on what was meant to be a routine cargo mission.
Among the cargo, several tons of lithium-ion batteries packed tightly below the main deck. A hidden danger, unnoticed at the time. At the controls, two highly experienced American pilots, confident and prepared for the long journey ahead.
The weather was ideal. Clear skies, light winds, and no signs of trouble. Everything pointed to a routine flight. Moments later, the massive aircraft thundered down the runway and lifted into the darkness. A journey had begun. Inside the cockpit, everything was calm. Systems normal, workload low. No warning of what lay ahead. At cruising climb, UPS Flight 6 appeared just another aircraft crossing the night sky. But that would soon change. 10 minutes after departure, the aircraft continued its steady climb away from Dubai.
Still routine.
Then, a caution message appeared, indicating a fault in one of the aircraft's air conditioning packs.
Not uncommon. Not alarming.
The crew responded calmly, following standard checklist procedures they had practiced countless times. The warning cleared.
With the issue resolved, the aircraft continued climbing under autopilot control. All systems appeared normal. The jet continued toward its planned cruising altitude, the earlier warning already forgotten. No cause for concern yet.
It's the Frosts. We begin with breaking news tonight as we track an urgent aviation alert developing overseas.
For the crew.
But deep below the cockpit, danger was already present, unseen and undetected. The clock had already started. 13 minutes after takeoff, a chilling alarm shattered the calm. The main deck fire warning.
A worst-case scenario.
Both pilots instantly understood the gravity of the warning. An onboard fire leaves only minutes to survive. There was no time to waste.
The captain immediately declared an emergency and requested a return to the nearest airport.
Help was needed, now!
Air traffic controllers immediately prioritized the aircraft as it turned back. Every second mattered. The massive aircraft rolled into a turn, abandoning its journey to Germany. The return had begun. The crew immediately began the fire checklist. Actions rehearsed but never hoped to be used. Training took over.
At this moment, the fire was still unseen, but already growing beyond control. The danger was closer than they knew.
With a fire warning active, both pilots immediately put on their oxygen masks. The situation was escalating.
The captain initiated a descent, beginning the race back to land. Time was now critical. Critical steps were taken to reduce airflow and limit oxygen to the cargo deck. Every action mattered.
Breaking news, an urgent aviation alert is in effect.
By depressurizing the cargo area, the crew attempted to starve the fire of oxygen, a textbook response. Despite the warning, the fire had not yet revealed itself to the crew. But it was growing. For a brief moment, it appeared the situation was under control. That calm would not last.
Deep inside the cargo hold, a single lithium-ion battery likely ignited, triggering a chain reaction. The fire had begun.
Unlike ordinary fires, lithium battery fires produce their own oxygen, making them nearly impossible to suffocate. Altitude could not stop it. Unlike ordinary fires, lithium battery fires produce their own oxygen, making them nearly impossible to suffocate. Altitude could not stop it.
Even fire extinguishers would have failed. Some could have made it worse. There was no stopping it.
Only the fire-resistant lining stood between the Inferno and the cockpit. Its time was limited. In the cockpit, the crew still could not see or smell the fire raging behind them. They were fighting blind. From this point on, UPS Flight 6 was in a race against a fire that could not be controlled. The clock was winning. Despite every correct action, the fire continued to intensify at a terrifying rate. It was accelerating. Temperatures soared high enough to weaken metal structures inside the aircraft. Damage was spreading. Smoke began moving forward, creeping ever closer to the cockpit. The barrier was failing. As the fire spread, aircraft systems began to fail in sequence. Control was slipping. Despite the chaos, the crew continued to fight for the aircraft. They did not give up.
The flight was now entering a critical phase where survival hung by seconds. There was no margin left.
The final barrier protecting the cockpit was beginning to give way. Smoke would soon follow. Then, the fire announced itself. Thick, toxic smoke flooded the cockpit. Conditions turned critical. Visibility dropped to almost nothing as smoke obscured instruments and lighting. They were flying blind. The smoke was highly toxic. Without oxygen masks, survival would be measured in seconds. Every breath mattered. The crew opened the smoke shutter, hoping to clear the cockpit. It helped, briefly. Instead, more smoke was pulled into the cockpit, worsening conditions. There was no relief. The smoke blocked cockpit lighting, plunging the flight deck into darkness. Control was slipping away.
The environment inside the cockpit was pushing the crew to their physical limits. The worst was still ahead. Suddenly, the captain realized the aircraft was no longer responding to pitch inputs.
Something was terribly wrong.
Repeated attempts confirmed it. The aircraft could no longer be pitched manually.
Manual control was gone. Extreme heat had weakened the steel control cables running beneath the cockpit. A catastrophic failure.
Unknowingly, the autopilot could still control the aircraft from the tail. But they didn't realize it. The captain delivered the words no pilot ever wants to say, "I have no control of the aircraft." With pitch control failing, the odds of survival collapsed. They were running out of options.
The fire now struck the crew directly. The captain's oxygen supply suddenly failed. Time was measured in seconds. He attempted to reach a backup oxygen bottle stored behind the cockpit. It was a desperate move. Without oxygen, the captain struggled to breathe in the toxic cockpit. His strength was fading. Overcome by smoke and fumes, the captain never returned. The cockpit fell silent.
We have breaking aviation news. The first officer was now completely alone. A two-person job, now one.
He now had to fly, navigate, communicate, and survive alone.
The odds were impossible. Still, the first officer continued fighting to bring the aircraft home. He would not give up. As the aircraft descended, direct radio contact with air traffic control was suddenly lost. There was no reply. Descending below the radio horizon, the aircraft could no longer reach controllers directly. They were cut off.
Dense smoke made it impossible to read or change radio frequencies. Options were vanishing.
With no other choice, the first officer called a nearby aircraft for help. A desperate solution. Messages were relayed through multiple aircraft and controllers. A slow, fragile chain. Every delay was dangerous.
Controllers struggled to grasp just how severe the emergency had become.
Time kept slipping away.
With no direct guidance, the first officer was now flying blind toward the airport. The margin for error was gone.
We are following breaking news regarding an aviation alert. The aircraft is attempting an emergency landing in Dubai.
The autopilot guided the aircraft onto the extended runway centerline. Precision mattered now.
With visibility gone, an automatic landing was the only option left. The system had to work.
But the aircraft was far too high and moving far too fast. The margin was razor thin. The first officer deployed speed brakes, trying to slow the aircraft. The response was limited. He tried extending flaps and landing gear, but damage limited their movement. The aircraft resisted. This was the first officer's only chance to land the aircraft. There would be no second attempt.
The aircraft crossed directly over Dubai's runway, far too high to land. Dubai was no longer an option.
Through the relay aircraft, air traffic control delivered the devastating update. The moment of truth.
Controllers suggested one last option, diverting to Sharjah. A final gamble. The first officer received new heading instructions toward the alternate airport. Every input mattered.
In the smoke and confusion, the wrong heading was selected. The aircraft turned away.
With smoke, stress, and exhaustion, situational awareness collapsed. Orientation was lost.
The aircraft entered its final, irreversible descent.
There was no recovery.
Below the aircraft lay a densely populated residential area. The stakes were enormous.
For a brief moment, the aircraft climbed away from danger. Hope flickered.
The first officer pulled with everything he had to avoid the ground. The aircraft responded, barely.
But the climb came at a cost. Airspeed was bleeding away. Lift was vanishing.
With insufficient speed, the aircraft could no longer maintain lift. Gravity took over.
Until the very end, the first officer fought to save the aircraft.
There was nothing left to do.
The impact was now inevitable. This was the end of Flight 6. At 8:41 p.m., UPS Flight 6 struck the ground at high speed. There were no survivors.
The aircraft disintegrated, erupting into a massive fireball. The wreckage burned intensely.
Debris was scattered across the desert, burning fiercely. Nothing remained intact.
The aircraft narrowly missed a residential neighborhood. Lives on the ground were spared. Emergency crews rushed to the scene within minutes, but there was nothing they could do.
A column of smoke rose into the night, visible for miles. The tragedy was undeniable.
The flight ended here, but the consequences were only beginning. A tragedy that would change aviation safety. In the days that followed, investigators began piecing together what had happened. The search for answers started. In the days that followed, investigators began piecing together what had happened. The search for answers started.
Investigators traced the fire to a shipment of lithium-ion batteries. The cause was clear.
The fire had burned for several minutes before detectors sounded the alarm. Critical time was lost. The fire intensity exceeded what the aircraft systems were designed to handle. The aircraft was defenseless. Investigators concluded that once the fire reached a certain point, survival was impossible. The outcome was unavoidable. From the wreckage, crucial safety lessons began to emerge. Change would follow. The loss of UPS Flight 6 sent shockwaves through the global aviation industry. This accident could not be ignored. New fire detection systems, stronger cargo containers, and stricter lithium battery rules were introduced. Change had begun. Captain Doug Lamp and First Officer Matthew Bell were remembered as dedicated professionals. They fought until the very end. The legacy of Flight 6 lives on in the safety improvements that protect crews today. Their sacrifice was not in vain.
This was the story of UPS Flight 6, a tragedy that changed aviation forever. Never forgotten.